Dear learners, welcome you all to e-learning platform. Now we have reached week 10. In this week you will learn Act 3 to Act 5 of The Way of the World, written by William Congreve. Along with the summary from Act 3 to Act 5, you will also learn major and minor themes in this play with an analysis of the climax. Me, Faisal Ahmed, with you throughout this lecture. Let's begin. The Way of the World by William Congreve. Lesson breakdown. In Lesson 1, you will learn the summary of Act 3. In Lesson 2, summary of Act 4. In Lesson 3, summary of Act 5. In Lesson 4, conflict in the play. And in Lesson 5, you will learn the major and minor themes of the play. Let's begin. Lesson 1, Act 3 summary. Acts 3, 4 and 5 are all set in the home of Lady Wishford. We are introduced to Lady Wishford, who is encouraged to marry Sir Rowland, Mirabel's supposed uncle, by foible so that Mirabel will lose his inheritance. Sir Rowland is, however, Waitwell in disguise, the plan being to arrange a marriage with Lady Wishford, which can't go ahead because it would be bigamy, not to mention a social disgrace. Waitwell is only a serving man, Lady Wishford an aristocrat. So it would be a disgrace for Lady Wishford, while she got to know the real identity of Sir Rowland, who is in fact Waitwell in disguise. Mirabel will offer to help her out of the embarrassing situation if she consents to his marriage with Millamant. Later, Mrs. Fainall discusses this plan with Foible, but this is overheard by Mrs. Marwood. She later tells the plan to Fainall, who decides that he will take his wife's money and go away with Mrs. Marwood. Lesson 2, Act 4 summary. Mirabel and Millamant, equally strong-willed, discuss in detail the conditions under which they would accept each other in marriage, otherwise known as the Provisio Scene, showing the depth of feeling for each other. Mirabel finally proposes to Millamant, and with Mrs. Fainall's encouragement, almost consent, as Millamant knows of their previous relations. Millamant accepts. Mirabel leaves as Lady Wishford arrives, and she lets it be known that she wants Millamant to marry her nephew, Sir Wilful Witwoud, who has just arrived from the countryside, her village. Lady Wishford later gets a letter telling her about the Sir Rowland plot. Sir Rowland takes the letter and accuses Mirabel of trying to sabotage their wedding. Lady Wishford agrees. Lady Wishford agrees to let Sir Rowland bring a marriage contract that night. Lesson 3, Act 5 summary. By Act 5, Lady Wishford has found out the plot. and Fainal has her Waitwell arrested. Mrs. Fainal tells Foible that her previous affair with Mirabell is now public knowledge. Lady Wishford appears with Mrs. Marwood, whom she is thanking for unveiling the plot. Fainal then appears and uses the information of Mrs. Fainal's previous affair with Mirabell and Millamant's contract to marry him to blackmail Lady Wishford, telling that she should never marry and that she is to transfer all the money over to him. Lady Wishford tells Mirabell that she will offer consent to the marriage if he can save her fortune and honor. That's the climax of the Mirabell and Millamant in this picture. Mirabell calls on Waitwell, who brings a contract from the time before the marriage of the Fainals in which Mrs. Fainal gives all her property to Mirabell. This neutralizes the blackmail attempts, after which Mirabell restores Mrs. Fainal's property to her possession and then is free to marry Millamant. The Provisio Scene. The Provisio Scene in Act 4 of The Way of the World, couple Mirabell and Millamant find themselves in a battle of wit as they discuss the terms of their marriage. This scene, called the Provisio Scene, gives important insight into Mirabell and Millamant's relationship. The terms of both characters illustrate their concerns and fears of their future marriage. This scene is called the Provisio Scene of the play. Millamant's terms. The Provisio Scene. Allowed to stay in bed late as she wishes. Mirabell cannot call her by pet names. No public displays of affection allowed. Allowed to have any visitors without question. Allowed to write and receive any letters without question. Not required to spend time with Mirabell's friends or family. And she is allowed to eat dinner together or alone as she wishes. She is also allowed to dress how she wants. She is allowed to be in charge of her tea table. Mirabell must always knock before entering her room. Now let's get to know the terms given by Mirabell towards Millamant before the marriage. Millamant must not have friends who are women. Millamant must like her own face. Millamant cannot wear makeup or other cosmetics. Millamant must not wear corsets. Allowed to restrict Millamant's drink intake. Lesson 4. Conflict in the drama. Protagonist. Mirabell is the protagonist and controls the action of the play. The Way of the World is essentially about Mirabell and his love for Millamant. Antagonist. Fainal and Mrs. Marwood perform the roles of the antagonists and villains in the play. They are diametrically opposed to Mirabell and Millamant. Climax. The plot rises to an intense climax in Act 4, when Sir Rowland's wooing of Lady Wishford took place, and he was unmasked as Waitwell. Outcome. The play ends in comedy as Mirabell defeats the counterplot of Fainal and Mrs. Marwood. He produces a need in which Mrs. Fainal had earlier signed over her fortune in trust to him. Therefore, Fainal cannot claim this money, which no longer belongs to his wife. Lesson 5. Themes. First of all, major theme. The major theme is indicated by Congreve in the title itself. The phrase "the way of the world" indicates manners and outlook of the characters in the Restoration era in England. at Lady Wishfort's house. Lesson 5, themes. Minor themes. Several minor themes pervade the play. There is a romantic theme of the hero who proves his worth and finally wins the fair heroine. The importance of money to the majority of the characters in the play. That's the end of lesson in week 10. Thank you very much for being with me throughout these lectures. See you next week with new lesson. Bye bye.